You are listening to Waffle, the bite-sized podcast with Paul Jenkins. First broadcast on Rossendale Radio on the 15th of November 2020. This week, Paul talks to Rossendale resident and Rossedale Hospice volunteer Dorothy Mitchell. She talks about running with the Olympic flame as a child, her long years of nursing, especially in Zambia, and how that sparked her writing with her new book, Old Nursing Times.
104.7 Rossendale Radio.
Welcome back to the Weekend Wind Down, everybody. It's Paul Jenkins here with the Waffle Hour, and every week we speak to a new author or somebody who's written a book or somebody who's a poet or a performer, and it's very rare that we get somebody from the Valley who is so well known before we even begin to talk about them. But for many people in the Valley, I only need to say the name Dorothy Mitchell and they know exactly who I am talking about, and it's an absolute honour. Dorothy is on the line. Can you hear me, Dorothy? Hello, how are you doing? Welcome to the show this afternoon. I've got your book, Old Nursing Times, in front of me. But before we even get to your book, we should, for those people, the very few people who don't know who you are in the Valley, we should probably explore who you are. You've clearly, as you've written a book called Old Nursing Times, you started your career as a nurse, didn't you?
Oh, I did, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
When I was 17.
17. So, just a couple of years back, right?
Yeah.
And what was that like? How has things changed in those years since you started your career?
Well, we did a lot of cleaning.
Is that true?
A lot of cleaning. Things were very, very different in these days, Paul. We have much more patient contact with it, and there were things that nurses do today that we never ever did. Our entire life was spent keeping the patients clean, warm, comfortable, and feeling safe with us, if you will. Reassure the patient was the first thing that came over. And that had to carry on all the time. I never actually took blood pressure or took blood until I had two registrations behind me. We didn't rise to such dizzy heights. We were sort of, in a way, I suppose we were skivvies. The importance of cleanliness was such that for your first year, you never got out of the sluice.
It sounds.
Then when you got graduated from that,
yeah, you
got the bathroom.
It sounds like the bedside manner and the kind of hygiene of the hospital was the main thing. I've noticed in the book you talk about like preparing for you mentioned about injections, things like that, about stabbing oranges with a syringe as a practice. Is that right?
Yeah. That was what I mean. We did everything we did was there was no pre-packed anything. It took hundreds of items in order to do a bath. You didn't just grab a face cloth and a bucket and on you go. You had to set a trolley, and then you had to take the temperature of the water and wipe your syringe. And there were no disposable syringes. In fact, the first disposable syringe I ever met was in Africa. And we didn't have them in England in these days at all.
I think you've seen my questions in advance, because I was about to ask you about Africa, because you weren't just a nurse over here. You spent a lot of time in Rhodesia, which of course we now know as Zambia. But you spent a long period of your life working over there in a very different hospital situation, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, it was a very, very interesting experience, and it's something that I've valued all my life, because so much of my afterlife actually came on the confidence developed on the backing of actually the amount of responsibility we had as nursing sisters in Africa compared to what was expected of us in the UK. People, you had no ward doctor or anything to depend on. You might have a ward and each bed had a different doctor. and they might not even live within your calling distance. They came in by plane, or they came in by road because the doctor sent them. But you have to be. I suppose it was a learning curve, but it was wonderful experience, and it's a wonderful country.
I can imagine, and there's a great deal in the book. There's a lot of chapters devoted to sort of your experiences there, because you have worked all over the world. You worked in the Royal Edinburgh Hospital for quite a while, for the Hospital for Sick Children, which incidentally, bizarrely, I visited before, not as a patient, as a performer. I went there once to the children's ward, so I know that hospital quite well. But you've worked everywhere, and it's absolutely amazing. What we're going to do, Dorothy, is that you've chosen a few musical tracks for us as well, and we're going to talk about the more of your career, because we're going to talk about Rossedale Hospice next. But you've chosen for us Mull of Kintyre by Wings, Paul McCartney. What was it about that song that you really liked and thought you'd choose? Why did you choose that one?
Well, it became popular when we moved to live in the Lake District. And then, strangely enough, the children, they went to a small village school. There were only 9 children in the school. And they had a song. And for a while, it just sort of was part of our daily life, was the Mull of Kintyre. And then the older children would sort of draw a deep breath and sort of, not again, as the little ones were proceeding to, sing forth their own little song about their own little schools. Happy memories of Mull of Kintyre.
I love the idea that Mull of Kintyre, even though you won't have the Mull of Kintyre itself, but the Lake District is a very good substitute, I think. That's a lovely idea. OK, here's Mull of Kintyre. This is Wings.
At home, in the office, in the car, wherever you are, you can listen to 104.7 Rossendale Radio.
Welcome back to the Weekend Wind Down. It's Paul Jenkins here, and my guest this afternoon is Dorothy Mitchell. We've been having a chat off air about the wonders of technology and trying to get things working during a lockdown. You were saying to me, Dorothy, that it's because obviously the lockdown's in full force, and it's a bit of a shame that you can't come into the studio this afternoon, isn't it?
Well, it's not really a shame, because I didn't have to dress up or have my hair done.
Which is exactly what people do for radio. We have all this all the time of say we're coming on the radio, and the amount of people say, "Well, I'll make sure that I get my hair done." I was like, "This is radio." Now, people throughout the valley will know you as, I was looking through, just did a quick Google search earlier on, and I put Dorothy Mitchell, MBE in there. And there's a reason that you have been so highly regarded and recognised. And that's because of your work in the community. And you were instrumental in one of our partners that we talk about all the time here on Rossendale Radio, in the setting up of Rossedale Hospice. How did that come about?
Well, it came about in a very strange way, Paul, because I didn't intend to do anything like that. I was invited to help somebody whose husband was going to die, and she asked me, she said, "Well, I'll look after the living. You'll have to help me with the dying." Well, when I actually looked into it, there wasn't anything there. And when I looked a little bit further to it, it was a lot more complex than I'd ever thought possible. So I did a lot of research, and then I went out to find somebody to see if anybody locally would be interested. And I was very lucky. I visited hospices all over the country, and I spoke to doctors, and I read everything that was written about it. And then I prepared a paper, and then I first introduced it to the throtomists. And they thought, yes, this is definitely something we could do. And the very first people, we met up again a couple of years back at the hospice when they had an anniversary. Mm-hmm. And it was lovely to see them again. Some of us are dead, but some of us are still pegging on. But the very first ones, Mary Nuttall, Brenda Shufflebottom, Sheila Whip, all these people, they're still there. Chris Durkin, was one of the very first ones, and she's still vice chair of hospice. So we're not all decrepit.
I don't think decrepit is the right word from the amount you're still doing.
Well, we do knock on, don't we? But the thing about it is that we no sooner talked about it than the sort of Rossendale mafia, if you will, got in on the act, and then Jim Watts was next with bringing in Rotary, and then the churches came along and the local doctors, and we were very, very, very fortunate that we were well supported, and we have something very, very special in Rossendale, which is something that not many people had at the time that we began. Because at that time, hospices weren't what they are today.
No.
Nothing like. I mean, palliative care is a massive medical specialty now, and there is so much more that we can do for people who have a horrible diagnosis than in those days 35 years ago. And we were first in lots of things that we did, because in order to get the money that we needed in Rossendale, because we're not a big community, we had to move outwards and sort of sell our wares, if you will, in order to draw the money in to get ourselves embedded properly. And that made us pioneers in a way. And quite a lot of modern hospice care started in Rossendale. But
I think you're right.
You won't hear them bragging about that, and I didn't used to, but I do now, because I can see what a lot that these people from Thropton's to Rotary and the local churches did 37 years ago that actually made us a forerunner in palliative care.
I think you're right, and it's when you were saying about that. I love the way you described them as the Rossendale Mafia. It's because you're right. The Rossendale community is not a big community, but my goodness, it's a strong community. And the way that even with us here at the radio station, the community radio station, the amount of community groups who get in contact with us because they want to share things or they want to share experience, and you find out that there is a group of maybe 30, 40 people throughout the valley who really do want to see everything succeed and will share things. Even if we have a toy appeal at the moment between kids in Rossendale and the Rossendale Community Support Network, who are all coming together. And it's organisations working together, like you said, that can make massive changes in things like healthcare. And as you say, it is a big thing, the way that hospice care has changed, even in the last 20 or 30 years or so. Now that becomes part of your experience, and your memoirs are all brought together in this book, Old Nursing Times, and we're going to talk about that in the final part of the interview this afternoon. But you've taken us to we were talking about our stage to screen show, which is on at 7:00 this evening, and you've chosen a piece from a musical, from Aspects of Love, but you've gone for Michael Bull's version of Love Changes Everything. Why do you like this track?
I don't know, it's just a track I used to play in the car on my way up to Bacup. When it's a long way from here to Bacup.
I like that.
But for quite a few years, I worked on. I actually worked out of Bacup in the community, because when I retired, I didn't want to. Well, I was a workaholic, so I put myself into full-time work in the voluntary sector. So I worked in Bacup for a lot of years, and I used to play it going up and down.
It's nice, actually, when sometimes people give you these deep, meaningful things like, well, I met this artist in this and it reminded me of this time. And some people just go, no, I really just like this tune. This is lovely. And that's a perfectly good reason to like a piece of music. This is Love Changes Everything by Michael Bull.
The frequency.
104.7.
The area.
Rossendale Valley.
The station.
Rossendale Radio.
Welcome back to 104.7 Rossendale Radio. This is the Weekend Wind Down. This is the Waffle segment, and I have with me Dorothy Mitchell. Thank you very much for your music choices, Dorothy. We very much enjoyed a bit of Michael Bull there. Now, we're talking about your book, Old Nursing Times, and I know you've got lots to tell us about it, but I just want to read a little bit from the About the Author section, because at the front it says Dorothy was a nurse by profession, forced by adversity into business. Now, retiring, right now, this is always the thing I find about people who retire. He says she had 84 hours to fill each week, and now physically decrepit. She doesn't see well, can't drive, and is unable to be an active social entrepreneur. Large print on Kindle and Sudoku being insufficient, she decided while she can still drive a desk, she would write about old nursing times. I was warned this about you, right? I was told she's modest. She'll never sing her own praises. And I've got to say that sounds like you're not filling up 84 hours a week. You're writing an absolutely cracking book. I've had a read through this, and it is a brilliant memoir. It's absolutely so entertaining. Why did you decide that now was the right time to write your memoir?
Because I needed to find a hobby. My usefulness has gone. I need to fill the time in, and I thought, well, yeah. And then the idea came to me that I could use COVID to, push it on a wee bit.
Did you only start writing when the pandemic started?
Yeah, I had actually written a little bit of it for my children because over the years, grandchildren have needed to know things for school, like the Olympic flame. And then I had to write then about Granny running with the Olympic flame. And then I had to write about my grandfather and the war and all these various things and what happened when. Because children come now with their homework projects.
Yep.
Well, I have a lot of children and a lot of grandchildren. So I did have some of it in before. But it didn't... It has come out quite quickly, actually. Much more. I thought it wasn't going to come out till next year.
I like the fact that when you have that much life experience, you can throw in a sentence like, oh, and when I ran with the Olympic flame, and that's just an ordinary conversation for you. That would be a whole interview for me. I'd be talking for years about how I ran with the Olympic flame. Was that through the valley?
But that in these days was no great. I mean, even my granny didn't come and walk. And it was raining like mad, and I was soaked to the skin. And the only bit they were really bothered about was, well, my coat would be dry for school next day.
They'd be making a fuss about it now, that's for certain.
Yeah, well, but I didn't realise until I watched it on television years ago, and I thought, well, it wasn't like that in my day.
No. But this is the thing about the book is I went from reading it, and I only managed to get a copy yesterday. But I'm sort of been having a skim through sort of some of the chapters. But one of the things that is lovely about it is it makes everything so very real, and it doesn't feel like one of those, oh, it was better in the past. It's more, no, it was just different in the past, and actually this was our experience. And that's what's lovely to read about this book, is that there's so much to learn from the book, without it sounding like, oh, it was better in the... It's not one of those bygone days were better kind of books. It's more this is how we've got to where we are today, and it's a lovely journey to read about nursing and how it's changed, and about your experiences within nursing and your life experiences. It really is a lovely book. Did you find it difficult to... Do you have notes from the past or things that you've remembered? Was it a struggle to remember all of this information?
I'm a lot better in 1950 than I am in 1990.
I suppose it must be. There are things I suppose we all have engraved on our brains from our younger days. I can remember exactly what I was doing when I was 12 years old, but I can't remember where my keys are today. So we do find it a lot easier to remember those things. When people buy the book, and people are going to buy the book, I'm almost certain of it because we're going to make sure they do here at Rossendale Radio. Because you're raising money for some charities that you're passionate about, aren't you?
Well, we're raising the money. Well, the thing is, there's a limit to how much money you can raise in a community like Rossendale. So the thing is, we had to look outside of Rossendale to get started, and then to get the thing in up to date, up to the minute, and get all the research done. We actually went outside Rossendale and created programs in Rossendale which we could, shall I say, sell outside and bring income back into Rossendale in order to feed the hospice. So in the beginning, we had to be completely sustainable in order that we could make enough money to take with the amount of money we could bring in from the community to make it work. Because there is they don't get an awful lot now from the government, but they do get a great deal more than we did, because we didn't get anything in the beginning at all. We did run, to say how amateur we were, a really good service, but it was initially quite heavily volunteer-led. And so a lot of our money depended on having grants, which allowed us to create programmes to sell elsewhere, and then use the income that we made in order to set it up. And that's why we're an integrated care centre, not just a plain hospice. Because some of the programmes that we created have been replicated elsewhere. One of the cancer programme, the main one, went into 36 health authorities at the end of the research period, and that actually brought us in quite a steady income while it was growing, and enabled us to be stable and then grow. But we can't go hand to mouth all the time. So it wasn't. We didn't have to go around doing jumble sales all the time. Yes, we did, and we had to do dark patches and things like that. But we did actually try to bring in outside money into Rossendale in order to grow what we needed, and it worked.
It's like what you were saying earlier. It's about that joined up thinking, and that those joined up communities are working for the same goal. And I think that is a lovely thing. And what is nice about this book is it isn't, even though obviously your story is very much based in the Valley, because that's where you are, but it isn't. You can pick this book up if you're interested in nursing. And I actually would strongly recommend this to anybody who's involved in healthcare, because it really does give you an idea about, as I mentioned earlier, that journey of where we've been and where we're going next. Dorothy, it's been absolutely lovely to talk to you about the book. We'll make sure it's published by Olympia. It's in their biography and true stories section. You can also search for it online, and you can find a copy of it, how to get hold of a copy of Old Nursing Times. You've chosen a Nana Mouskouri track to finish. It wasn't one we had in our database when we started, but we've got it in there now. Are you a big fan of Nana Mouskouri? Excellent. So, Dorothy, please, we'll keep in contact with you. I'd love to find out about how the book's going on, and fingers crossed, when all of this is over, we can either get you to the studio or we'll get to you for a face-to-face interview. I'm sure there's plenty of people who'd want to catch up with you. But thank you so much for being my guest this afternoon.
Thank you.
Right, let's leave you with Nana Mouskouri.
104.7 Rossendale Radio.
And there you have it. We come to the end of another weekend wind down and the end of another Waffle, the bite-sized podcast. And my guest this week was Dorothy Mitchell. What a great person to speak to. Absolute figurehead in our local community, and she's written this amazing memoir. It's a brilliant book, Old Nursing Times. I've had a look through it, and I've had at the moment a skim read and sort of gone through chapter to chapter, and my goodness, whether it's her time talking about the Edinburgh Children's Hospital or her time in Rhodesia or about coming back and of course all of her life since, it puts everything into context, and it makes me understand healthcare as a non-healthcare professional. I thoroughly recommend it to anyone who is involved in the care of other people, whether they're working in the NHS or elsewhere. It's an absolutely cracking read. My thanks again for coming on the show, and fingers crossed we'll be able to speak to Dorothy at some point in the future, out of lockdown. That would be lovely to actually meet her and maybe get her into the studio, or we'll come and see you, Dorothy. One of the two. We'd love to find out how the book's been getting on, and of course how much money you're raising for local charities, as you have done for so many years. My thanks to everybody at Rossendale Radio for allowing us to broadcast on a Sunday afternoon and to put together Waffle, the bite-sized podcast, and of course my thanks to Melanie Kemp for all her work editing the show each week. We'll be back with you with another great guest next week. In the meantime, stay safe, and we'll see you very soon.